Goeiedag! Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And I have another treat for you. This is one of Fiona's new articles that's just come out. And it's more about Zulu traditions and superstitions and understanding the Zulu way of life. And this article is simply headed up the Oyo, and it's actually pronounced oyori. So just to get that right, this is oyori. I was 5, going on 6 years old. It was a sweltering hot afternoon with no breeze to rustle the dry, greenish-blue eucalyptus leaves in the huge gum tree we were sitting under, or give us some respite from the sun's scorching heat. Evelina and Lisha sat chatting on the grass mats just behind me, their sturdy dark brown legs stretched out in front with their ankles crossed and their backs resting against the massive, smooth, grey tree trunk. They were threading tiny multicolored beads onto the outer edges of crocheted cotton circles, which they made to keep flies out of jugs and bowls and sold them to Mum, Mrs. Bannatyne, our farm manager's wife, and supposedly my governess, and the nuns for a few pennies each. They adorned every milk jug, jam and sugar bowl that appeared on tea trays and the dining room tables. My little sister, 3.5 years younger than I, lay sleeping on a rug next to Lisha. She was wearing just a romper suit made from a pink cotton material, sprigged with tiny scarlet rosebuds. Her bare legs sprawled on the rough red and green tartan blanket. Her fine, white blonde hair tousled, twisted tendrils struck to her damp cheek, flushed and moist from the searing heat that managed to bore between the gum trees leaves and radiate off the hard-baked ground. I was in a pair of khaki shorts and a pale blue t-shirt, and I was bored. My little sister looked very vulnerable lying there, and I toyed with the idea of tickling her ankle with a twig I'd picked up to make her think that there was something crawling on her bare skin. Amongst almost everything else, she was terrified of spiders, so much so that even if she walked into a web, she went hysterical, clawing at her face and screaming with terror. I always found this phobia of hers highly amusing and laughed at her as she ran around in panic circles, hands clutching frantically at her pink cheeks to try and rid herself of the fine, sticky, silvery strands. I looked at our nannies, chatting contentedly, as their fingers worked busily through the rainbow of beads, and decided instead to draw an elaborate picture in the gingery red dust with my twig, while I listened to the Zulu conversation going on behind me. When Nyaga, I heard that oyoro again last night. It made me go cold with fright and start to shiver, said Evelina. How, Wendlovo? Dadi vetu, nafumfuti. Oh, my sister, me too. We'll have to bring the cattle closer to our huts or we'll have no milk, replied Lisha. Wendlovo was Evelina's Uspongo, her tribal surname, meaning elephant. Lisha's surname translated as the moon, and this is how they always addressed each other. Zulus give their newborn babies a traditional Zulu name, often corresponding to the baby's surroundings or even weather conditions at the birth. Dumasani is a common name for boys, Duma meaning thunder. Other names like Jabu or Jabulani for girls means joy or happiness, and there are other variations such as Toliwe, which means received something precious. Then it is common practice for a mother to give her baby an English name as well. There are boys called Joseph, Ezekiel, or Jeremiah, and many others, Old Testament names. Other English names such as Mary, Joseph, and so on are taken from the New Testament. Happiness, togetherness, patience, and even sixpence and shorty are popular English names. The best name I ever came across was Shitmelik, shits in the milk bucket. Shits in the milk bucket. Well, the best I ever came across was I was working at Barclays Bank in Akopa, and I had to go through all the savings cards and check signatures and all that sort of stuff. And seriously, this woman's name was Mama Ntembo the Second. That was the name, the second. I just never got over that. Okay. So the best name I ever came across was Shit Melik. Shits in the milk bucket after a cow did just what that while being milked. A new baby son was born to the herdsman that day, and the unfortunate Christian name stuck. On top of both names, English and Zulu, they all have Uspongo, a tribal surname. Thus people like our cook was Benjamin Bogiti Masango. Out of respect, we white children had to call them by their Christian names. There were a few exceptions though, such as Makaya and Lokatia, who didn't have English names, but we called Masango by his Zulu name, Bogiti. He reacted by threatening us with whatever sharp kitchen utensil had come to hand and calling us cheeky little brats in Zulu as we scampered out of his way. I'd be lying on my front of my elbows in the dust, bare legs crossed up in the air and absorbed in my drawing. Hearing the conversation, I looked up, startled. "Why no milk?" I asked. I too had heard the loud echoing yelp of the oyori, repeating its name over and over through the darkness, becoming nearer and louder each time it called. My father told me that the oyori is a big grasshopper with an inflated balloon-like abdomen. It makes its call by rubbing its back legs against its belly, which amplifies the noise. I said, "Makes the noise louder, and makes it carry very far." I intoned parroting this information with all the importance of a precocious 5-year-old. I didn't know the Zulu word for abdomen, so I said isinka, which means buttocks. "Hi, aibo, a grasshopper with buttocks," exclaimed Evelina. "No, everybody knows it's a big, big black snake." "Yes," added Lisha, it carries a bright lamp on its head, and it comes sliding out of the river on the darkest of nights." I sat up, my twig discarded, and my eyes wide. My blood had run cold. "Why does it come out of the river?" I quavered nervously. "The snake is very, very big, and it likes milk," Evelina explained, putting down her beadwork and stretching her plump brown arms out wide to demonstrate the length of this huge snake they called the oyori. Alicia gave an exaggerated shudder and drew her dusty bare feet back underneath her and onto her woven grass mat at the very thought of the snake. "Is it a black mamba?" I asked. I had read about mambas in my father's snake book, which he kept on the telephone shelf. Right up until 1970, before Telcom upgraded our system, our phone was a small wooden box situated on a makeshift plank, bolted to the wall in Dad's office. It had 2 shiny metal dome-shaped bells on top, and we shared a party line with 11 others. To make a call, our parents lifted the black Bakelite receiver from its hook attached to the box and would listen to see if there was anybody else using the line. If there was silence, they had to call out, "Line clear?" If nobody responded, Mum or Dad vigorously cranked the little black handle on the side of the box to call the exchange in Nottingham Road. There were 12 farms, including the Roman Catholic convent, sharing that one line, and we all had our own Morse code ring. Ours was 1012, one long crank and then twice for the 2 short rings. It seemed that whenever my father wanted to make a call to his accountant in Maritzburg, the nuns were always on the line, talking in French. He could hear them jabbering away at top speed every time he picked up the receiver. He said grimly as he put the receiver down again, none too gently, "For a bunch of women who are supposed to be in silent retreat, they spend one hell of a lot of time talking." On top of the snake book, Dad also kept the snakebite kit in his office. A tin box containing a rubber tourniquet, a razor blade, a large syringe, and a rubber-sealed glass vial of polyvalent antivenom, meaning it was effective for treating the 2 main snake bites of our particular region. The snake book showed all the most venomous snakes in southern Africa, in descending order of how lethal they are. The black mamba took pride of place on the frontispiece, followed in toxicity by the green mamba and the boomslang. The text under the pictures of both mambas said, "If bitten by either of these snakes, the victim has 10 minutes to find the antidote, and injected above the bite area before he becomes paralyzed and dies. Everybody called it the 10-minute snake. I was fascinated with the tin, which had a picture of a rearing Cape cobra on the lid, with its hood spread out, spitting, and when there was nobody about, I dragged the swivel chair from its place at my father's big wooden roll-top desk, and by climbing on it I could reach the snakebite outfit. I went through the items in the tin box and pored over all the colourful illustrations in the leaflet. One of my other favourites was a huge tome called Sheep Management and Diseases, which had brightly coloured, lurid photos of many gruesome ailments that my father said the sheep was so very good at contracting. I decided that I was going to be a vet when I grew up and read all this grisly information over and over again, saying the longer words out loud under my breath, whispering the wonderful, exciting medical terms to myself until I could repeat it all verbatim. I spent hours fantasizing, imagining myself in a crisp white coat, stethoscope around my neck, presiding over a gleaming, sterile veterinary surgery. The snakebox leaflet also explained that polyvalent antivenom is created by injecting minute amounts of venom into horses, which gradually generated the antidote in their blood, which was then drawn and the serum separated. Polyvalent antivenom was effective for treating the two main snake bites of that particular geographic area. Mambas and cobras, among many other snakes, deliver neurotoxic venom, which attacks a victim's entire nervous system, shutting down vital organs by paralyzing the lungs and thus immobilizing the respiratory system. Quite quickly, the venom reaches the brain via the bloodstream and effectively paralyzes it completely, killing the victim. I read too that vipers, such as our common puff adders and more sinister night adders, insinuated themselves into the house at night to hunt for rodents and could be found slithering silently alongside one's bed. An unwary bare foot could easily step on the snake as the victim got out of bed in the dark for an innocuous visit to the bathroom, and in that way provoke a bite. This was designed to paralyze a rat or mouse and then turn the flesh to liquid, effectively pre-digesting the creature before the snake swallows it whole. In a human, this venom had the effect of turning the foot into a huge swollen purple mass as the weakened blood vessels leak blood into the surrounding flesh, which turns to soft jelly, an agonizing process which, if not treated instantly, invariably culminates with the limb turning gangrenous and needing amputation as a life-saving operation before the gangrene spreads further. I'd questioned my father about mambas, and he assured me that as they were coastal snakes and preferred a hotter climate to ours, neither he nor Grandpa had ever heard of one being seen around these parts. Now here I was being told about the sinister black snake. I digested this piece of information for a while, abstractedly scratching an intricate pattern in the powdery red dust with my twig. The sun was setting below the mountain behind the house, and a cooler breeze was rustling the dry gum leaves, releasing the pleasantly pungent aroma of eucalyptus. It was getting on for our bath time. During the evening I was unusually quiet as Evelina bathed us, my sister first and then me, dressed us in our cotton short pajamas, then sent us running and skidding on the grass mats along the polished wooden floor on the wide passage that led to the sitting room, where our parents were settled in comfortably with their first whiskey and water the evening. I stepped halfway down the passage at the yellowwood stable door that led out to the back veranda. There was a neat round chunk gouged out of the wooden steps where a year before Grandpa had blasted the head off a ubulu, or a puffadder, with his 12-bore shotgun. The snake had been trying to get into the house, where it would be sheltered from the cooling night air. My heel fitted exactly into the hole in the step, and for a moment I stood there thoughtfully, picturing in my mind the thick, sluggish, zigzag-patterned puffadder. I knew the Zulus didn't mind snakes around their kraals. They kept the rat population down, but puff-adders were a different matter. Their ambush manner of lying well camouflaged in pathways, basking on the warm ground, combined with their lightning-quick and deadly strike at a careless foot, made them, according to the snake book, the most common cause of snakebite deaths in the country. Everybody on the farm killed puff adders that they found around the farmsteads, and I'd seen many of their desiccated skin nailed to the mud walls of the Zulus' round huts to serve as a warning to other adders not to come near. The older Zulus used the snake fat to ease rheumatism in their joints. They also took the poison glands out and dried and ground the contents into powder to use as umuti, or witchcraft medicine, and many of them wore the fangs for charms. We sat with our parents for our obligatory half hour before bedtime, listening to our mother read Pookie, the little white rabbit with wings, to us. The coziness of the so-called adventures of the twee English woodland creatures of rabbits, squirrels and elves only served to contrast now with my own alarming recollection of what Evelina had told me about the oyori. It was a warm night, and I performed my ritual of simultaneously switching the light off at the wall near the door and leaping from the switch onto my bed, so that whatever hideous creature that lay in wait under the night frill wouldn't have a chance to grab my ankles. I lay down with just a cotton sheet over me and picked up a book from my bedside table. I spent as long as I could reading by the crack of light that came through from the passage through my half-open door until my eyes ached. My mother had confiscated my bedside lamp weeks ago when she discovered that I was reading at night, all night, engrossed in one of my father's books about the Second World War. She had wondered why I appeared so pale and red-eyed every morning, crabby and more than quarrelsome than usual with my sister. Finally, the words began to dance in front of my eyes, and the book slipped from my fingers. Now I was wide awake, startled by the first call of the oyori, right beneath the big open sash window of my bedroom, which was at the very furthest end of the house. I pictured the enormous thick black snake rising out of the waters of the Amgeni River below the house, a glowing lamp shining a yellowish beam from its big head. I imagined it slithering up through the garden and into the herbaceous border just below my windowsill. I tightened my grip on the flimsy sheet that I'd pulled over my head and lay still, hardly daring to breathe. And what could it be that had disturbed the crickets? Usually while the oyori was yelping out its horrible onomatopoeical call, crickets and tree frogs carried on their quiet background static. Now they were silent, which was most odd. I lay under my sheet, rigid with fright. It was pitch dark outside, and everything had sounded normal as I'd fallen asleep with the usual shrill chirping of crickets and the peep-peep song of tree frogs chiming outside my bedroom window. I'd woken with a jolt to find there wasn't a sound other than the oyori. There was an ominous quiet out there, which meant something big was close enough to frighten them into silence. It was all very well, I thought frantically, Evelina telling me about the big black snake, but Zulu children went to bed in their huts and slept very close to their mothers. We white children had our bedrooms on the far side of the house, well out of our parents' earshot. I heard a rustling noise in the hydrangea bush just beneath the windowsill, and a loud snort. "Oh my God," I whimpered to myself. Was it the snake or a leopard? I knew that leopards prowled around in the dark too, sneaking out a tasty young baboon to drag out of the treetops, in which the troop cowered to sleep at night. The dogs usually warned us by barking furiously when they detected the unmistakable sense of the big cat, but they weren't making a sound. My father and Grandpa had reassured us that the leopards didn't come into the garden, but stayed in the bush across the river, stalking through the darkness to snatch an unwary, sleeping baboon. But could they be wrong? Would a leopard drag me out of my bed and carry me off? I wondered if I should jump out of bed and race down the passage to our parents' room on the other side of the big, rambling house. This would be the last resort, as we knew that we were only ever to disturb them if one of us was very, very sick or dying. I weighed up the consequences of knocking on their door and waking them, and decided to stick it out where I was. Then I heard a gushing noise, and something that sounded like water being poured onto the plants just outside my window. This didn't tie in with snakes or leopards, and while I was still lying trying to puzzle out the sound, I fell asleep. Early the next morning I was woken up by my mother, rampaging around outside, shouting for Begindlela, her gardener. "That bloody great bull got into the garden last night," she shouted crossly to me through the window. "Just look at those deep hoof prints in the lawn, and the mess he's made of the wall, where he splashed the whitewash by whittling next to it. He's eaten most of my lovely herbaceous border. One of the herdsmen must have left the gate open. Damn it." And she went off still ranting. I put the pillow over my head and tried to recapture that nice sleepy feeling I'd been experiencing before I'd been jerked awake. But it was no good. I was wide awake now. What the Zulus call the oyori is the nocturnal male bladder grasshopper, Bullocris membracioides, Orthoptera numeridae. This insect gives out a call, oyori, oyori, which can carry up to 2 kilometers away. I have a photo of one in my book. So, that's a little bit of the superstitions and beliefs of the Zulu people, and you can see how it revolves around animals and magical influences and all that sort of stuff. Alright guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Don't forget, Friday night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, Fiona's going to be live with Sia, Muzi, and what's the other fellow's name? Miles. We got 4 guests on Friday night at 8 p.m. and we're going to be talking about basically this subject. So it's going to be a fascinating discussion. Okay, now I've already said subscribe and ring the bell, so I'm just going to say, please remember to share this video, please like this video, and above all, stay safe.